In 2017, I wrote a book called The War on Truth, in which I introduced the concept of hard virtues and soft virtues as a means of explaining the state of the world and of predicting its future. The book, as with all Fuel Project titles, was turned into a video series that was then released in weekly installments on YouTube, and finally it was made available for digital download on the website, thefuelproject.org. From that moment on, whenever someone asked me for my favourite Fuel Project series to date or the best place to start with this ministry, I would always say that one. Start with The War on Truth. It had been a long time in the making, in truth, and it really started when, as a teenager, I noticed that if someone stated their opinion on one topical issue of the day, you could then curiously but quite accurately predict their position on a whole range of other seemingly unconnected issues. For example, I noticed that if someone stated they were a feminist, they'd almost certainly also be an advocate for gun control, socialism, gay marriage, green politics, and were far more likely to be a vegetarian or a vegan as well. And possibly more likely to have purple hair on top of that. Why? I wondered, what is the connecting thread here? What have guns got to do with female emancipation? And what has veganism got to do with your preferred economic model? To me, it made as much sense as saying if someone's favourite colour is blue, then their favourite sport will be badminton. There seemed to be no obvious connection. What's someone's favourite colour got to do with their favourite sport? Well, what's someone's favourite economic model got to do with their position on gay marriage? There seemed to be no obvious connection between these things. And yet I would find myself wondering about it over the years and wondering what the connection was, because of course the reverse also holds true. If you discover that someone is strongly in favour of unrestricted gun ownership, you can then accurately predict that their preferred economic model is going to be capitalism. They'll probably also advocate for traditional family values and not be so interested in green issues, and they'll probably also enjoy a good barbecued steak on top. And indeed, I noticed that politically, democracies tended to always split into two broad camps. So again, what's the core idea that causes that phenomenon, that causes that division? With the passing of years, I felt I was beginning to understand. I was beginning to connect the dots, and I was developing this theory, which, in honor of this series, I'm going to start calling the trench theory. It didn't really have a name until just now. The trench theory says that you can divide all virtue very broadly into two categories: the hard virtues and the soft virtues. And it's through that prism that we can understand why people tend to broadly fall into two categories politically: the political left and the political right. It was something that made sense to me, at least, and by 2017 I felt confident enough to share these ideas publicly for the first time, and that's what became The War on Truth. I was happy with how The War on Truth turned out. As I already mentioned, whenever anyone asked me which Fuel Project series to start with first as an introduction to this ministry, I would always say that one. But I guess that kind of begs the question then, why are we returning to this? Why are we going back over this ground if you already covered it and you were already happy with the original results? And I would say there are 5 reasons that are making me want to revisit this concept now. Firstly, it's 5 more years in which I've been able to evolve and understand the trench theory in my own head. And that should hopefully, in theory at least, mean that I can now explain it more clearly than I could 5 years ago. Secondly, I'm revisiting this concept because I just have far more to say about it now. So much has happened in the last 5 years. We've had the Black Lives Matter movement, we've had Brexit, COVID-19, the economic fallout of that, a surge of authoritarianism and globalism, an intensification of the culture wars, increasing attacks on free speech, transgender controversies, the encroaching cashless society, the rise of China, the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the climate agenda, and so much more. These things alone make the subject worth revisiting, because the trench theory is going to explain and make sense of all of that and so much more besides. And I hope that by watching this series, it's going to feel like putting on a pair of glasses, and all of a sudden everything that's going on in this world is going to start making sense. We need a Christian perspective on what's happening in our age, and we need the church to be clear about what's unfolding so that it knows how to respond. And I believe to that end, the trench theory is a biblical theory. It comes out of biblical insight, and this series is going to help immensely, I hope, in that regard. Thirdly, I feel like in hindsight, I could have been bolder in the War on Truth, and I want to correct that in this series. There were things that the trench theory predicted would happen in our generation, and I wish I just said it in 2017 because those things are now coming to pass. But the truth is, I held back from saying it at the time. For example, I could have predicted through the trench theory that our generation would start denying basic truths, like 2 + 2 = 4. In 2017, that just seemed a bit too far-fetched. I thought, I can't say that some people are going to start denying that 2 + 2 = 4. I mean, that's absurd. Surely it will never go that far. And that will undermine the whole argument I'm trying to make if I make ridiculous claims like that. And yet, in the past couple of years, it started happening. People have started denying that 2 + 2 = 4 and saying that men can have babies and all kinds of things. Which just kind of makes me think, why didn't you just say? Why didn't you trust your conclusions more at the time? So this time around, I've determined to be bolder in trusting the outcomes of the trench theory, and I'm just going to say them out loud in public. At the very least, I'm going to make the case for what the trench theory predicts, and I'll leave it up to you to make up your own mind about whether that could feasibly happen. And ultimately, the passing of time is going to prove these correct or incorrect. Fourthly, I think honestly the War on Truth just didn't reach as many people as I wanted it to or felt that it should. Now this is a problem I have in general. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I always feel like I could be doing more and reaching more, and I wonder if anything I do will ever feel like it's enough to me. I've got a bit of an issue with that. But I can't tell you how many times I've watched world events unfolding in recent years, and I've witnessed the confused responses in the people around me. People sort of grasping in the dark for how to make sense of it, and I've thought, but this shouldn't be confusing because we went over this in the War on Truth. I did a book and series on this. It explains why this is happening, and I almost have a sense of desperation now for people to just understand this. And I feel like if I can just get this message to more people, and Christians especially, it will bring much needed clarity in the middle of a very difficult time in world history. And I guess I just keep thinking, but why haven't enough people watched this already? Maybe I need to explain it more clearly, or maybe I need to present it in a more accessible way than before. What can I do to amplify this message? The truth is, I don't know, but I just have this unrelenting sense of urgency to give this another pass because I want it to reach more people than it did last time around. And that leads on to the fifth and final reason to dive into the trench theory again. Quite simply, I feel like I can present it better than I could back in 2017, and maybe, I don't know, but maybe that will make a difference in its reach. You know, even as I look at the green screen of the War on Truth in 2017, it just doesn't look as good to my eye anymore. So I'm going all out with this project in ways I can't even describe. Indeed, if you've been following the Fuel Project, the YouTube channel in recent times, you'll be kind of aware of this, that very recently I was making Fuel Project videos in a small loft space in my 1-bedroom home, but that small size was kind of limiting what I could do in terms of presentation. So to give this new series every possible chance of reaching a wider audience, I've literally sold that old house and I moved to a slightly bigger place. It gives me better possibilities. And I put everything on the line to make this happen. I've literally put everything I have on the line to try and do this to the best of my ability. So as well as moving house, I've been investing time and effort into Adobe After Effects. I just want this thing to be the best that I'm possibly capable of. All my time, energy, investment, thoughts and prayers have for some time now been fixed on one solitary goal: to get this piece of content to as many eyes and ears as I can, because I believe so much in the importance of this as a message for our time. Whether I'm right to believe so passionately in this message is something that only the passing of time can reveal, but nevertheless, I just want to know for the sake of my own conscience that I just gave this my absolute best shot, and I tried with everything that I had to reach my generation before it was too late, and I tried to be salt and light with everything that I had, even as Western civilization moved into the mess that it's currently getting itself into. There's one final thing that I need to say before we get started on this. This is the structure of what we're going to be building in this series, and there are 3 sections to it. Section 1 is laying the foundation of the trench theory so that we understand exactly what it is. In section 2, we'll then start explaining how this theory makes sense of world history, and then in section 3, we'll start getting into how this explains the times in which we're currently living. Now, originally I had intended to go into a 4th, 5th, and 6th section where we would look at wokeism, LGBT issues, victimhood, current events, just all kinds of different things, and the green agenda, all kinds of things like that. However, when I got to the end of section 3, I realized it was starting to get pretty long, and unless I wanted to turn it into some kind of epic, it was probably a good idea to cut it there and then separate out the rest of the sections and turn them into their own separate project. So that's exactly what I've done, and at some point in the future I intend to do that sequel that will follow on, hopefully seamlessly, from this. I should also say that the first part, the foundation of the structure, is almost identical to The War and Truth. So if you've already seen The War and Truth, I apologize that we're covering the same ground again, but it's just that I need to relay these foundations so that they're understood, so that everything on top of it makes sense. So that's all I need to say before we start. Again, my hope is that by the time you finish this series, it will feel like putting on a pair of glasses. I hope that where the world once seemed fuzzy and indistinct and confusing, it will make sense. I hope that where you may have once been worried about the unfolding events of our time, this series will bring a sense of peace and calm. And ultimately, as with everything I do for the Fuel Project, I hope this series grows your faith in God, His Son, His Spirit, and His Word. Remember, as you watch this series, do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord will personally go ahead of us. He will be with us. He will neither fail or abandon us. May this series lead to understanding, resolve, and action within the church. And without any further ado then, let's just get right into it. Here is your Christian guide to the culture war and the postmodern age. I'm so excited that I finally get to say this. Welcome to Trench.